I was certainly never nervous about going to the capital market, and in fact it's a very exciting time for both Biocon and Syngene because we are unlocking the very latent value that Syngene has within the Biocon valuation. And I think it is very important for me as the main promoter of Biocon and then Syngene later on to unlock this very important value. And I think Syngene is now poised at a time when it is on a very, very strong and robust growth trajectory. And that is why we are taking now Syngene to the market. This is also a time when Biocon needs to monetize its investment in Syngene, which it has carried for so long. And therefore, I think it's a win-win for both Biocon and Syngene.
Right. But compared to the feedback that you received during the Biocon IPO, are people a lot more receptive now because they really understand the sector, understand the business? Because I'm sure it would have been very tough to actually explain Biocon's value proposition to investors then. In that sense, has it been much easier now with also the credibility that you've carried through Biocon in the last decade?
Well, let's put it this way. Syngene's business model is a much simpler story to tell.
Right.
It's a much easier proposition to make. And therefore, I believe that, the Syngene growth story, the Syngene business model is something that I don't really need to sell in the way I had to Biocon.
Right. Talking about valuations, as always, it's divided. Some people say, okay, it might look like a steep valuation, but completely justified if you look at the revenue, the margins, the growth potential going forward. But others say that, considering just 6 months back, this was valued at 3,800 crore. Now it is over 5,000 crore. So what really has changed in 6 months? What would you say to that?
First and foremost, I want to correct that perception that it was just 6 months ago that the value was 3,800. The valuation process for Syngene at the 3,800 crore investment was started more than a year ago. It just so happened that because of various regulatory requirements, especially FIPB, that it took 6 months to actually translate into the real investment. So I think over the last 1 year, I think Syngene has delivered on a lot of its growth engines. And I think if you look at the kind of margins, the growth trajectory, things have actually changed dramatically. And therefore, that growth trajectory that they are on today absolutely justifies the 5,000 crore valuation that we have actually come to the market with. And I think it is reflected in its, the margin story, the growth story. If you look at Syngene's CAGR, if you look at Syngene's margins and sustained margins, I think all this is very compelling and a very fair valuation that we are coming out with.
Right. Just one more question on this valuation bit, 240 to 250 rupees per share. Analysts are saying, this is already 20 times forward earning multiples, the parameters they are using. So they're saying, it's already so highly valued. So what is left on the table for retail shareholders? How would you counter that?
Well, I think it's a very fair valuation because if you look at Syngene's value proposition going forward, it is a very, very strong growth story and you're investing in that growth. So I think it's very justified. There's a lot on the table going forward. And I think investors in India need to invest in such growth stories. We are a very unique script also. Remember, today I think Syngene is not only the only script of its kind in India, but also if you look at it in Asia,
right.
The biggest competitor and the only competitor we really had in Asia was Wuxi. And Wuxi has already announced that it is delisting. Now that means Syngene becomes the only script of its kind.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.